The losses of Job. Let us settle in softly and listen closely to a story from long ago, a story about a man named Job. It is a gentle tale, though it speaks of some sadness and loss. We will take it slowly, in quiet moments, like the unfolding of a peaceful night. Job was a man who lived in a place called Uz. No one knows precisely where Uz was, but many imagine it might have been far away, beyond details we have today. It is enough to know that Job was a man of his time, living in the world of long ago. He was a good man, not perfect, for no one is, but very good. People said he was upright and careful with his ways. He was kind and honest and did what he believed was right in every day. Job had a large family. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. The names of his daughters were Jemimah, Keziah, and Karen-Happuch. Their names sound like soft songs, like a gentle breeze. He owned many animals too, thousands of sheep and camels, cows and donkeys. This showed that he was rich in a simple and old way. People respected him, for he was honored among the people of the East. Job was a man who took care of many things. He was careful to listen and to help those who needed him. If someone did wrong, Job would think it through and speak wisely. If children had trouble or people were sad, he was there to offer comfort. When Job's children gathered together, they ate and drank and rejoiced. They would sometimes hold feasts in their homes. After such times, Job would rise early and offer prayers for each of them. He offered burnt offerings, gifts to God, just in case they had done something wrong without knowing it. This tells us a tender, simple truth about Job. He cared enough to ask for forgiveness, to keep his family close to what was good and right. Now in the quiet heavens, far above the world where Job lived, a meeting took place. It was a meeting among the heavenly beings, often called the sons of God. One of them was called Satan. He came before God in this gathering. There on the heavenly stage, God spoke about his servant Job. God said something kind, that there was no one on earth like Job. He was blameless and upright, always fearing God and turning from evil. But Satan, sometimes called the Accuser, thought differently. He wondered if Job was good only because his life was safe and full of blessings. He asked a question, soft yet sharp. Does Job serve God without reason? Would he still be faithful if all was taken away? God allowed a test, not a test that God required to know Job's heart, but a test to show something more. Satan was given permission to bring trials on Job, only not to harm him personally, not to take his life. We are told of this not to cause fear, but to understand the story fully, slowly. Then one day, as Job was at home, news came swifter than the wind. A messenger, breathless and trembling with grief, arrived with terrible words. First he said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them. Suddenly raiders came and took them all. They killed the servants with the sword. I alone have escaped to tell you. Before Job could breathe again, a second messenger ran to him. The fire of God fell from the heavens, he said. It burned up the sheep and the servants watching them. I alone have escaped to bring you news. Before his heart could settle, a third messenger appeared, nearly fainting with sorrow. Chaldeans formed 3 bands. They swept down on the camels and carried them off. The men who looked after them were killed. I am the only one left to tell you. Still, before Job could stand tall again, a 4th messenger hurtled into his presence. Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the home of their oldest brother. Suddenly a mighty wind came across the desert. It struck the house and it collapsed on them. They all died. I alone have escaped to bring this news to you. Now the sorrow and loss wrapped tightly around Job's heart, as if the night had fallen inside him. His possessions were gone, his children gone too. Everything he had held dear was swept away. Yet Job did something quietly remarkable. He stood, though his strength was barely there, and he knelt. He spoke words that were gentle and slow, not a cry of anger, but of acceptance. He said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. There was no sudden shouting, no loud complaints, just a whisper in the dark, a breath of faith beneath the heavy sorrow. Though he mourned, Job did not curse. He did not refuse to speak with God. Instead, he kept a calm heart, even as his world was shaken. And it is here, in this place of great loss and quiet strength, that our gentle story of Job lingers, waiting to unfold further. The losses he suffered were many, more than we often hear at once. They remind us softly that even the strongest can face great sorrow. Tonight, as we rest, we hold close the memory of Job's calm in the storm, the quiet prayer given in the deepest night. We will pause here, letting the stillness settle before the story moves on to what comes next. Rest now with these gentle words. The tale is not yet done. There is more to see in the days and nights that follow Job's great losses. For now, let the quietness grow, let the silence speak. It is peaceful to listen and to simply be. As the dust settled on the ruins of his home and the echoes of loss reverberated through his heart, Job sat quietly, his mind heavy yet steady. The weight of sorrow rested upon him like a shroud, yet he did not waver. His understanding of life, of God, and of himself remained rooted in faith, firm as the ancient hills. He lifted his voice in prayer, not from anger or accusation, but from a place of humble surrender. "Naked I came out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return," he whispered, a soft acknowledgement of the fragile nature of all earthly possessions. "The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." His friends who had heard of his calamities gathered. They came with heavy hearts, their faces lined with concern and sorrow. Their footsteps were hesitant at first, unsure how to approach a man who had just lost so much. Yet, their presence offered a fragile thread of comfort, a reminder that in moments of darkness, companionship could be a light. They sat with Job in silence, sharing in his grief, not rushing to offer easy answers, for none could touch the depth of his loss. The nights grew long, and in those quiet hours, Job wrestled with the many questions that rose unbidden. Why, he wondered, did such shadows fall upon a man known for his integrity? Was this trial a test of his spirit, or a message hidden deep in sorrow? Still, Job's faith did not flicker. He did not curse the heavens, nor did he drift into despair. Instead, he found a strange kind of peace amidst the ruins. It was a peace born not of understanding all the reasons, but of trusting in a wisdom far beyond his own. Days passed, each one carrying the weight of grief, yet also the gentle touch of hope. The land around him was still abundant with the things he had not yet lost, and slowly, with hands that trembled at first, but grew steady again, Job began tending to the fields and caring for what remained. It was a quiet resilience, a testament to the strength of the human spirit when held by faith. In time, the conversation with his friends grew deeper. They spoke of justice and suffering, of God's will and human endurance. Some questioned whether Job had indeed walked always in righteousness, probing quietly, the whispered doubts hanging between them like a fragile thread. But Job met their words without bitterness or anger. He spoke with honesty about his pain and his commitment to hold on to hope. Even in anguish, Job's heart did not close. He prayed not only for his own relief, but for understanding, for a glimpse into the mysteries that life so often shrouds in silence. As the seasons changed and the days moved from one to the next, Job's story became one not just of loss, but of endurance. He showed that even when the foundations of life crumble, faith could still hold firm. His replies to those who came to test his spirit were gentle but unwavering. Though pain sang through his being, he chose not to let it define him. In this way, Job voiced a truth that resonates across time, that suffering, while heavy and deep, need not extinguish the flame of hope. Instead, it can refine it, making it burn brighter through the darkest night. His life, marked now by the imprint of sorrow, became a quiet beacon to those who heard his story, a reminder that faith lives not in perfection or prosperity alone, but in the courageous arms that hold fast when all else seems lost. And so, amid the ashes of what was once whole, Job remained, a figure of steadfast trust, a soul anchored in the unseen hand of grace. The trials that had brought devastation did not destroy him. Rather, they revealed the strength within, a resilience woven by sorrow and faith together. This was Job's enduring legacy, that even in profound loss, the human heart can find a way to endure, to hope, and above all, to bless the name of the Lord. In the stillness of the evening, Job sat by the flickering light of a modest fire, the small flames dancing like fragile hope in the deepening darkness. His wide fields, once vibrant, were quieter now, the work slowed by the weight of recent pain. Yet within him stirred a gentle resolve, a bud of quiet courage breaking through hardened earth. The visits of his friends continued, each encounter adding layers to the unfolding story of his soul. They spoke in low murmurs, their voices often indistinct, as words gave way to shared presence. Sometimes no words were necessary, only the comfort of company and the feeling that no one must suffer alone. Even in this tenderness, Job felt the gentle probing, questions that sought to pin down the why of his suffering. Why, they asked, should a man so upright endure such calamity? Might there be hidden fault, some error unseen? Their words, though well-meaning, grazed at the edges of Job's peace, stirring a quiet unrest, but never breaking his core faith. He listened, thoughtful and unhurried. His replies came not as sharp accusations, nor as desperate defenses, but as expressions of a heart grappling honestly with the mystery. I do not claim to understand all the workings of the Almighty, Job would say, his voice steady. Yet I have not spurned him in my distress. My soul still clings to the hope that even in silence, there is wisdom beyond what I see. Nights often found him before God, not with demands or complaints, but with humble pleas. Show me, he whispered, what lies beyond the veil of this pain. Teach me to trust when all seems shattered. The prayers were quiet, shaped like tears and slow breaths. Prayers spoken in brokenness and peace, side by side. Time moved softly. The seasons shifted, tracing gentle arcs across the sky. With each passing day, Job's footsteps returned to the earth, his hands tending shoots and seedlings with patient care. The fields responded, as if knowing the touch of one who tended not just the soil, but his own bruised spirit. Growth returned in delicate green, fragile but determined. Job's friends observed this renewal with a mixture of hope and persistent queries. They wrestled too, each with their own understanding of justice and fairness. Some suggested that suffering bore a secret meaning, a message for those willing to seek its truth. Others hesitated, hesitant to dismiss the possibility of innocence and pain. In these conversations, Job found room to voice his raw truth. He did not gloss over his confusion, nor did he dress his feelings in easy answers. He spoke of the loneliness that settled like mist, the questions that refused to be silenced, but also the moments of quiet light that broke through. Faith, he said softly, does not mean having all answers. It means holding on when answers are lost in the night. Through these exchanges, a new understanding began to take shape. Not a simple one, but a tapestry woven from struggle and hope, sorrow and trust. Job's integrity was no longer defined by prosperity or favor, but by the steadfastness of his spirit, the resilience of a heart that refused to turn from mystery or mercy. In the depth of his journey, Job's mourning transformed into a meditation on life's fragile beauty. Each breath, each heartbeat, became a testament to endurance. His story was no longer only about loss, it was about presence, the sacred act of being here, even when the ground quaked beneath his feet. The people around him saw this change. It was subtle, not marked by grand gestures, but by a gentle lifting of the eyes, a softening of the lips that sometimes broke into a smile. Job's silence had grown rich with meaning, a quiet grace that spoke of trust beyond understanding. One evening, as the horizon blushed with the farewell of day, Job spoke again with his friends. His voice carried a calm strength, not of certainty, but of acceptance. My heart has been tested, he said, and it is still beating. I do not know the reason for all these trials, but I know that I am not abandoned. Somewhere beyond the clouds, there is a hand that holds mine. In the warmth of that moment, his friends felt a shift. The harsh lines of debate softened. The doubt that lingered began to melt into silent reverence. Together they sat in the fading light, companions in the shared mystery of life, loss, and faith. Job's journey was far from over, but in the quiet turning of days, he had discovered a truth that no loss could erase, the power of hope rooted deep in the soul, unshaken by darkness, unbroken in the face of despair. Thus Job became a quiet beacon to all who would listen, a living story of steadfast faith. His losses were many, yet they did not define him. Instead, they refined him, carving a spirit luminous with trust, a heart that blessed even in suffering, and a life that whispered a timeless song of endurance, grace, and the mysteries held close by the hand of God. Seasons moved onward, the land turning with ancient certainty, the sky softened in morning light and deepened in twilight, as if holding its breath in quiet wonder. Job, intertwined now with this natural rhythm, found a stillness that was not his before. It did not sweep away his past, nor diminish the weight of his losses, but it opened a window, narrowly cracked, letting in a gentler light. He rose with dew on the grass, feeling the earth beneath him, alive and steady. The small tasks nurtured a fragile grace, gathering wood, tending a simple fire, mending a tool with worn hands. No grand answers came in these moments, no great revelations. They were silent acts, persistence blinking in the shadow. The conversations with his friends continued, though the tone had thawed. They no longer sought to unravel Job with questions or accusations. Instead, there was a quiet sharing, a listening that grew out of the shared human knot of confusion and yearning. Sometimes words failed them, and silence spoke louder. "You carry this burden," his friend Eliphaz said one evening, sitting beneath a spread of pale stars. "But do you not feel how it shapes you, not just in sorrow, also in strength? What you are becoming, it has its own light." Job regarded him slowly. "I do not know what light shines here," he answered, "only that I must hold faith when the night is thickest. That holding itself is more than surrender." Through each small day, Job nurtured his fractured trust, as one might tend a delicate sprout through frost. He learned the subtle art of waiting without certainty, breathing with what was. On a cool afternoon, as wind stirred a scattering of dry leaves, Job stood by a quiet stream. Water flowed without question, carving stone by patient insistence, shaping a path that had no clear end but endless persistence. He watched the steady current and found kinship there. Perhaps faith, he thought, is the flow, unbroken, unavoidable, carving meaning through presence despite the silence. His friends watched this transformation with guarded awe. They saw that Job's face no longer bore the sharp lines of despair but carried depths of calm they had not witnessed before. It was a calm forged in wrestling, a dignity not in undefeated certainty, but in the courage to remain upright when all was lost. One evening, as the horizon bled into muted gold, Job spoke softly in the circle of their shelter. "We seek to understand the reasons, the order, the justice," he said. "But perhaps understanding is not the gift. Perhaps it is only the call to stay, to keep the heart open amid the storm, to live amid questions without answers." His friends nodded, the firelight flickering in their eyes weighed with empathy, respect, and a shared weariness. "To hold faith is not to deny the darkness," Job continued. "It is to walk through it without succumbing. It is to trust a greater presence beyond our grasp, even when that presence feels distant." Days lengthened. The earth, tender and persistent, displayed new blooms here and there, wildflowers twisting toward uncertain sunlight. Job saw them not as symbols alone, but as testament, life's fragile stubbornness, given no guarantee, thriving regardless. He often rose early, standing in the hush. Wind softened the tall grasses, birds whispered the beginning of song. This silence, pregnant with possibility, grew precious. It held no answers, but invited presence. One afternoon, while repairing a fence post, Job's hands halted. He looked out over the fields, now scarred and healed in cycles. He felt no rush, no urgency. The work was not the point, it was the continuing. On a quiet night, wrapped in a threadbare cloak, Job confided in his friends, who gathered close near the warm embers. "I have come to understand that loss is not a void to fill, but a space to breathe," he said. "In that space, something new can take shape. Subtle, unclaimed, imperfect. It is here faith lives." There was a slow, shared silence, holding that fragile truth as if it were a delicate flame. "And love," Job added softly, "endures in ways that defy explanation. It does not vanish with absence. It changes form, like the seasons, but it does not disappear." His friends, humbled by his quiet strength, looked at one another, a new respect knitting their spirits together. The harsh certainties of before dissolved in the gentle twilight of shared mystery. In time, Job returned more wholly to his place in the world, not as one who had conquered despair, but as one who had been shaped and refined by it. His faith was no longer loud or triumphant. It was the steady pulse beneath his breath, the quiet heart of his being. Others came to see him differently now. Where once they might have sought answers or judgment, they found invitation. Job's journey spoke not of final truths, but enduring questions, a legacy of courage born in the silence between words. As seasons turned again, Job's life unfolded gently. his presence a quiet testament to the power of steadfast hope amid brokenness. He did not know what lay beyond the horizon, nor did he need to. His journey had changed its meaning. Faith, he understood, was less about possession and more about perseverance, a constant tending, a refusal to let go, even when the path ahead was unseen. And so beneath the vast expanse of sky, surrounded by earth and friend, Job stood rooted, his heart quietly kindled by the tender light of enduring grace. In the stillness that followed, Job found himself more aware than ever of the delicate balance between presence and absence. Each breath carried both the weight of loss and the lightness of unexpected grace. His heart, though marked by sorrow, beat gently with a steady rhythm, as if learning a new cadence he had not known before. The seasons moved quietly around him, unfolding with a patience that echoed his own. Trees shed their leaves only to wear new cloaks of green. The river persisted in its course, undeterred by stones or bends, teaching without words the art of continual moving forward. Job watched these small miracles without haste, allowing their slow lessons to seep inside. There was a particular morning when the sun rose softly behind a veil of mist. Job sat by the stream's edge, fingers grazing the cold water's edge. A single wildflower had taken root nearby, a bright splash of color against the muted earth. It stood fragile yet unyielding, a whisper of life insisting gently on being seen. In that moment, Job felt a quiet communion with that wildflower, both knowing somehow the meaning of persistence without certainty. He thought of his own journey, the deep chasm of loss he had walked through. It had been more than suffering. It was a reshaping, a slow erosion of old certainties, so that something new, unseen but no less real, might take shape. If faith was a river, then patience was its bedrock, patiently carved over time. And in that carved space was room to breathe, to question, to hope. His friends still visited occasionally, drawn by the calm that now settled around him like a familiar cloak. They no longer sought answers from him, nor did they fear the silence that sometimes fell between their words. It was as though in their shared presence they acknowledged a greater mystery that both bound and separated them. One afternoon, a friend remarked on the change he observed. "You seem at peace, Job, not because you have forgotten, but because you have learned to hold what cannot be held." Job smiled softly, understanding, but the willingness to carry it gently without allowing it to fracture the soul. Days stretched into weeks, and the rhythms of the ordinary offered their own comfort. The rising and setting of the sun, the quiet rustle of leaves, the steady drip of rain, all became threads woven into the fabric of Job's renewed existence. He no longer sought certainty. Instead, he cherished the moments where faith and doubt intertwined like the roots of trees beneath the soil, unseen but vital. Sometimes Job would speak aloud into the dusk, words not meant for others but for himself, fragments of hope, questions, or simple acknowledgments of what was. "I do not know where you are," he murmured one evening, "but I trust that this path is not empty." Even in the face of silence, his voice held a gentle conviction, an offering without demand. The wildflower by the stream persisted. In its fleeting bloom, it embodied the fragile courage that life requires. Job found in it a metaphor both humble and profound, that faith, like the wildflower, does not insist on grand gestures, but grows quietly, insistently, in places worn thin by hardship. Sometimes, when shadows lengthened and the night seemed especially deep, Job would feel the old ache return. Yet it came softened, touched now by a strange tenderness, a reminder that pain and grace often inhabit the same space. He had come to accept this dual presence, allowing one to coexist with the other without erasing. Time itself seemed transformed in Job's world, not measured by milestones or answers, but by moments of receptivity. He moved through each day as one might through a sacred garden, observing with care, touching with respect, and sometimes simply being with what was. In silence, Job often reflected on the paradox of loss. It was not simply the taking away of what he loved, but also the invitation to surrender, to let go of control, to relinquish the need for clarity. Through this surrender came a kind of freedom, fragile yet nourishing, like the tentative opening of a bud before the dawn. This freedom did not erase the past. Instead, it wove memory and presence into a continuous thread, fragile but unbroken. Job's heart remained tender, open to the fullness of life's unfolding, even when that fullness was shaped more by absence than presence. In the presence of his friends and neighbors, Job no longer felt compelled to explain or justify. His quiet endurance became a beacon of strength, not in loud proclamations, but in the simple grace of being steady amid uncertainty. Others began to seek him not for answers, but for companionship in their own journeys through doubt and despair. There was a season when the wildflower bloomed more abundantly along the stream's edge, as if responding to some unseen call. Job took this as a sign, though not a conclusive one, that life continues to weave itself into new patterns, often in ways beyond human understanding. And so the losses remained, etched deep and true, but alongside them grew something delicate and unyielding, a faith that held no guarantees other than the promise of presence. This faith was not bright or boastful. It was quiet, persistent, like the stream itself, carving its path through stone, neither hurried nor hindered. Near the close of a long day, as the sky faded into soft twilight, Job sat once more beside the stream. He felt the cool breath of evening, the gentle stir of wind through grass and flower. In his heart, a silent affirmation settled, that love indeed endures, even beyond absence, and transforms all it touches. In this transformed love, Job found his final refuge, a resting place where questions need not be answered, where hope is a steady flame, and where the losses of the past become spaces carved out for new life to grow. Here in the stillness, he was home. The twilight deepens, and Job feels a soft quiet settling into his chest. It is no longer the sharp sting of fresh sorrow, but a gentle, worn ache, one that speaks of time's passage, of memory folded tenderly into the present moment. He walks slowly now, his steps in tune with the earth's whispering breath. The ground beneath his feet hums a familiar song, a soft rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird returning to its nest, the faint coolness of the evening air pressing against his skin. Everything seems to hold its shape carefully, as if the world itself understands the delicate balance between holding on and letting go. The wildflowers by the stream have multiplied since the first time Job noticed one solitary bloom. Now they gather in clusters, nodding their fragile heads toward the fading light. They bleed quiet color into the shadows, subtle and tenacious. To Job, they are more than just age-old remnants of life. They are the whispered promise of hope, the invisible thread tying yesterday to tomorrow. His hands rest lightly on the rough bark of an ancient tree. In its gnarled contours, Job senses a kindred patience. The tree has weathered storms, the loss of leaves, the passage of countless seasons. It endures, not by clinging desperately, but by bending respectfully to the sky and soil. Job finds solace in this resilience. There is no grand triumph here, no sudden healing, just a steady, calm continuation. Inside him, the mingling of grief and grace has become woven so tightly that the edges blur. He no longer tries to separate the two, for each has found its place like threads of differing colors in a tapestry. Sometimes the sorrow feels like a quiet river, slow and deep. Other times a sudden gust shakes the limbs of his heart, and the old pain flares briefly before settling again. These moments are no longer frightening, but simply part of the rhythm. As stars begin to peek out through the curtain of night, Job lifts his gaze, tracing constellations without naming them. The vastness above offers no answers, only the vastness itself, a reminder of mystery too big to grasp or control. Within this immense quiet, Job's small voice rises softly, a simple prayer that is more breath than words. He trusts, not because certainty has returned, but because even doubt can cradle hope when held gently. His faith has transformed into an unhurried letting be. It is not a fortress against pain, but a vessel steady enough to carry it. Job senses the presence of others, not in noise or seen form, but in the shared human endeavor to endure, to love, and to seek meaning amid loss. The countless unnamed companions on this path move beside him like shadows cast by a single flame. His heart no longer demands understanding or fairness. Instead, it stretches open, like the wildflowers leaning toward the stream, drawing strength from their fragile roots and the flowing water's steady song. Job knows now that grief is not an enemy to vanquish, but a companion to walk beside, its presence softening the edge of absence. His story, which once felt fragmented and raw, begins to settle into a gentle flow. Life will never be as it was before, but in this new shape there is a kind of peace, quiet, imperfect, and enduring. The wildflowers will keep blooming, the stars will continue to watch from the dark velvet sky, and Job will hold on to the fragile thread of faith, memory, and love, weaving them slowly into the fabric of each new day. a sacred tapestry of loss and renewal. Even as the night deepened, Job remained rooted in the silence, his breath slow and steady, harmonizing with the pulse of the earth beneath him. The world around him held its breath, as if waiting, suspended between every fading star and the promise of dawn to come. In this stillness, Job recognized the sacredness of pause, not a void, but a space where transformation unfolds quietly, beneath conscious sight. He thought again of love, the resilient flame that had never truly left him. It no longer demanded proof or explanation. Instead, it persisted as a subtle energy, woven through the fabric of his days like soft light filtering through autumn leaves. That light touched his thoughts, brightening the edges of memories once sharp and raw, now mellowed with tenderness. Job's hands traced the rough bark of the ancient tree, grounding him in the present. He understood that this tree had weathered countless seasons, storms and calms alike, yet it stood unwavering. Like this tree, he too had grown, shaped by loss, but also by an unexpected strength. The roots of this growth, though hidden, reached deep and wide, anchoring him in soil warmed by countless seasons of endurance. His heart, once hollowed by grief, began to feel its own steady rhythm, a slow and sacred beat, marking time beyond mere hours and days. It was not a heart that raced or recoiled, but one that opened subtly, allowing space for both sorrow and gratitude to coexist. In this blended rhythm was a new wisdom, that pain does not erase love, but transforms it into a deeper knowing. Outside, the wildflowers continued their quiet labor, petals unfolding in delicate celebration of life's persistence. Their colors were soft but insistent, whispers of hope in a world that often seemed indifferent. Job watched the light catch on dew before it vanished, reminders that beauty and loss hold hands, endlessly intertwined. In these moments, doubt and faith no longer stood opposed. Job's belief had softened into something less rigid, less certain, yet more expansive. He trusted the slow unfolding of mystery, the gentle reveal of truth hidden within questions. There was grace in accepting what could not be named or controlled. As the first pale light of dawn sketched gentle lines across the sky, Job rose with a quiet resolve. His steps were slow, deliberate, each one a testament to the journey he had traveled, from shattered despair toward a fragile peace. The path ahead was still unknown, but no longer frightening. It was a path marked not by certainty, but by the courage to keep moving, to keep loving, even when the way was unclear. In this new morning, Job carried with him the tapestry woven through all his days, the threads of loss and renewal, sorrow and grace, memory and hope. It was this tapestry that gave shape to his life, its imperfections and beauty intertwined in a sacred pattern beyond his full understanding. And with each breath, each quiet moment of awareness, Job embraced the ongoing dance of holding on and letting go, trusting that love, ever transformed and enduring, would remain his steady companion. This was the gentle unfolding of his story, a story without neat endings, where loss and life grew together, softly, endlessly, in the heart's abiding light. In the soft quiet that followed dawn's promise, Job's breath deepened, settling into the day like the earth beneath his feet. The world, emerging slowly from night's cool embrace, seemed to lean closer, to offer a subtle nod of recognition to his newly woven heart. The air carried the gentle hum of life, birds quietly rehearsing their songs, the faint rustle of leaves touching one another, the unseen pulse of roots drinking deep below. He felt it all as a balm, the sacred tension between what was lost and what remained alive in memory and in presence. There was no longer a sharp edge of grief slicing through the fabric of his being, but rather a soft worn linen, marked by life's touch, yet comforting. It was a different kind of sorrow now, one softened and shaped by compassion for himself and for the story that had brought him here. Continuing his silent dialogue, Job found himself drawn once again to the ancient tree he had come to know as a steady companion. Despite seasons turning, its bark remained knotted with time's slow artistry. His fingers traced familiar grooves, feeling the tree's patient endurance seep into his own hands, his own pulse. The roughness of the bark told of storms weathered, wounds healed, growth measured not in leaps, but in whispers. "This is the heart of patience," he murmured, voice barely above a breath, a witness not rushing toward answers, but holding space for the questions themselves. And so he allowed the questions to rest alongside him. In this quiet presence, He acknowledged the way loss had unraveled the neat fabric of his life, leaving edges exposed, threads loose. But rather than fleeing from those edges, he leaned into them, sensing that grace often lived in the worn seams between certainty and doubt. Throughout the day, Job's footsteps were light, touching the earth as though acknowledging both the fragility and resilience beneath. He noticed small marvels around him, an ant's patient journey, a spider's careful latticework, the slow blooming of a wildflower that had slipped unnoticed into the periphery. Each detail whispered a reminder: life's tenacity was woven from the smallest acts of persistence. As he walked, memories swirled, not sharp shards, but gentle waves folding into one another. Faces, laughter, silent tears, moments shared without words. They did not constrict him now, but moved through like rivers nourishing the soil of his soul. And within that flow love resided, not as a demand, but as a steady current, connecting past and present, holding him softly, even in solitude. His faith, once a pillar of certainty, now settled into something broader, a horizon stretching beyond sight. He sensed a presence not confined by dogma or answers, but expansive and mysterious. It enfolded him like the hush of twilight, a quiet assurance that his story was part of a larger unfolding, one that was both beyond him and intimately close. As the sun arced overhead, warming the land, Job paused beside a quiet creek. Its water, clear and constant, reflected sky and branches with gentle clarity. In its flow, he saw the impossible beauty of surrender, how the current embraced obstacles and continued, unyielding yet adaptable. He knelt, cupping water in his hands, feeling the cool pulse spill through his fingers. It was a reminder of life's cyclical rhythm: birth and decay, loss and renewal, endings woven into beginnings. In this place, moments stretched with a sacred stillness. Job breathed in, anchoring himself in the fragile present where grief and gratitude brushed against one another like soft wings. Here, he found no demand to fix or fixate, only the invitation to be fully there, vulnerable, open, embraced by a world that knew both joy and sorrow intimately. Evening came, dressed in shades of violet and gold, and Job returned to the tree. Darkness settled around him, thickening the air with cool mystery and quiet invitation. He pressed his palms once more to the bark, feeling the rhythm of life beneath the surface, a pulse subtle as a secret. The night cradled him, each breath a thread weaving together the tapestry of his renewed heart. In the unfolding dark, stars emerged like scattered seeds of hope, constellations ancient yet alive, mapping stories held for millennia. Job looked upward, letting the sky's vastness remind him that his grief neither erased nor diminished the expanse of life's ongoing song. Instead, it was one note in a symphony infinite and profound. As he lay beneath the sky, body grounded, heart unfolding, he held gently to the understanding that love, even when touched by loss, never truly fades. It shifts shape, becoming a steady glow beneath the surface, warm, quiet, enduring. And sorrow too was welcome here, no longer a burden, but a presence to be carried with tenderness and respect. The night deepened, and with it came a soft resolve. Job thought not of fixing the past or predicting the future, but simply of continuing to walk, to breathe, to love as best he could in the fragile light of each new day. There was courage in this quiet persistence, a brave kind of acceptance that knew how to hold the weight of sorrow and still reach for joy. Was neither triumphant nor grand. It was simple, a gentle unfolding of light, a breathing space between dusk and dawn. Job rose slowly, feeling the tender pulse of life within him steady and strong. He carried the sacred tapestry, delicate yet resilient, threaded through with loss and renewal, memory and hope, sorrow and grace. His journey was far from over, and he no longer feared the unknown paths ahead. Instead, he met them as he would an old friend, sometimes welcoming, sometimes difficult, always part of the unfolding story told beneath the canopy of stars and the steady watch of ancient trees. In this quiet knowing, Job moved forward, one step and one breath at a time, wrapped in the enduring light where grief and love weaved together in a dance as old as time itself. Days drifted softly into one another, a delicate web of moments strung between the steady pulses of breath. Job found himself drawn again and again to the places where earth met sky, where the tender curve of a hill faded into clouds, and where light played meaningfully on the surface of leaves and stones. Each morning, rising with the quiet stirrings of dawn, he walked slowly, letting his feet fall where they might, unhurried, absorbing the subtle rhythms of the world waking beside him. Dew hung like tiny jewels on grass blades, glistening pearly and pure. Songbirds offered fragmented melodies, as if testing notes against the cool air. There was no rush, no insistence that understanding come all at once. Instead, patience became his companion. Patience and the acceptance that life's truths often dwell not in grand revelations, but in small, unfolding details. On one such morning, Job arrived at a patch of wildflowers near the creek's edge. The same blooms had returned, their fragile petals unfurling toward the sun, their colors vivid against the soft green. It struck him then how resilience is often quiet, unnoticed, taking root where no eyes linger, living steadfastly beneath the radar of urgency or human acclaim. He knelt, his gaze soft but focused, tracing the veins on a leaf, the curves of a petal. Within the flower's delicate form, he saw a mirror to his own journey, fragile yet persistent, a life sustained not by certainty, but by the embrace of the present, however uncertain it might be. Grief had sculpted him like a river carved stone over time, smoothing sharp edges, deepening wells of empathy, revealing layers that once lay buried beneath hardened surfaces. It no longer ached with the same relentless intensity, though it never fully disappeared. Instead, it murmured in quiet moments, a reminder of what had been lost and what remained: love, memory, the unbroken thread binding past to present. With each breath, Job felt gratitude weaving itself into the fabric of sorrow, a gratitude for the very capacity to feel, to remember, to continue, for the love that still lived, transformed but enduring. The seasons turned imperceptibly, painting the landscape in shifting hues, then surrendered to earth with a gentle surrender that spoke of natural cycles, beginnings folded into endings, endings seeding new beginnings. Job welcomed these transitions as teachers. With every falling leaf, he sensed a subtle lesson of letting go, not with resistance or despair, but with open hands and trusting heart. To release what had been cherished without losing the reverence it deserved. One evening, as dusk bled slowly into night, Job sat beneath the stoic arms of the tree that had become his refuge. The sky was a deep indigo, stars shimmering faintly in the vast silence. A cool breeze whispered, carrying the faint scent of earth and rain. Sitting there, alone yet profoundly connected, he felt an expansive peace settle within him. A peace born not from understanding all, but from allowing mystery its place. The vast unknown no longer intimidated him. Instead, it invited him to lean into existence with humble awe. He realized that grief and love were not antagonists, but partners in a dance as ancient as time itself. Each step, sorrow and joy, loss and hope, blended seamlessly, composing the melody of a deeply lived life. In this acceptance, Job's spirit found rest. The night deepened, and his thoughts wandered gently toward the future. There was no need to map every path or predict every turn. Instead, the journey would continue through presence, in the simple acts of noticing, breathing, being. Each dawn would bring its own quiet renewal, a promise held softly in the palms of waking light. Job would greet these mornings not with fear or resistance, but with a steady heart, open to whatever might come. As stars faded before the rise of sun, Job rose as well. The world stirred anew, and so did he. He took a final gaze at the tree, a silent gratitude glowing within him. The losses he carried had changed him, shaped him, but they no longer defined him wholly. Life's breath pulsed strong beneath the layers of grief, vibrant and enduring. With slow, deliberate steps, Job walked toward the morning light, ready to meet the unfolding day, to live with courage, with tenderness, with an ever-deepening sense of presence. And in that quiet resolve, there was hope, a soft hope, like the wildflower blooming, unseen but beautiful, persisting beyond words. In the soft hush of early morning, Job rose with the gentle light spilling through the window like a whisper. He paused for a moment, feeling the stillness wrap around him, a tender cloak against the swirling thoughts that once clouded his mind. The quiet was no longer empty, but full of possibility, a space where healing could quietly take root. Stepping outside, Job breathed deeply, the crisp air carrying a faint scent of dew-kissed earth and distant pine. Each inhale was a small ritual, a way of grounding himself in the present moment. The world continued indifferent and steady, yet here in the calm, Job found a profound steadiness within himself. He had come to understand that life's deep sorrows did not vanish in haste, but softened like the edges of worn stone, becoming part of a textured landscape within. Job noticed a creek's gentle murmur, a soothing melody mingling with the rustle of leaves. He watched as a leaf floated downstream, tracing the current without resistance. It reminded him of the way he had learned to move through his grief, not by struggling against it, but by flowing alongside, allowing each feeling to rise and fall naturally. There was wisdom in that surrender, a humble courage beneath the surface. As the day unfolded, Job's attention lingered on the small wonders often overlooked. The delicate architecture of a spider's web, bejeweled with fading drops of morning dew, the quiet dance of bees darting between blossoms, tirelessly gathering life's sweetness, even as the season hinted at change. These fragile acts of persistence mirrored his own patient tending of the heart's wounds. In this attentiveness, he discovered a renewed sense of tenderness toward himself and others. Later, sitting beneath an old oak tree, Job reflected on how his grief had become a guide rather than a tyrant. The sharp pangs had given way to a subtle presence, one that reminded him daily of what was lost, but also revealed what remained, the resilience of the spirit and the enduring bonds forged by love. He realized that to carry grief was also to carry memory, and within memory a kind of sacred continuity. He thought about the friends who had journeyed alongside him, their steady words like lanterns in darkened woods. Their patience and silence had granted him room to be raw and to heal slowly. Gratitude warmed him. He understood now how connection eased sorrow, weaving invisible threads that tethered broken pieces with gentle strength. As afternoon light softened, Job's mind wandered to the seasons yet to come. He welcomed the changes, understanding that just as the earth shed leaves and lay bare, so too could he shed old layers of pain when the time was ripe. Each cycle offered renewal, not erasure but transformation born of time's gentle hand. This rhythm resonated within him, a promise that healing was not a place to reach but a way to move. Evening settled with a quiet grace. Job sat by the window, listening to the distant call of an owl and the hushed sigh of wind through the trees. He felt the stillness deepen, not as loneliness, but as a companion to be trusted. The unknown no longer frightened him. Instead, it invited a humble curiosity, a wonder at mysteries beyond words or understanding. In this space, Job sensed a subtle shift, an opening. The grief that once loomed vast and consuming had shaped a tender awareness, a readiness to embrace life afresh, carrying both joy and sorrow like intertwined threads. Love and loss, he realized, were not opposites but partners in the delicate dance of existence. As night deepened, Job allowed himself to rest, wrapped in the simple truth that pain was part of the tapestry but not the whole design. Tomorrow beckoned softly, a space for new moments, new breaths, and the quiet courage to continue. With eyes closed, he whispered a small grateful prayer, not for changing the past, but for the strength to walk forward gently, with heart open and spirit steady. The losses he bore had carved paths through his soul, and he walked them now with a quiet, enduring strength, revealing not emptiness, but a well of compassion and light. And so, in the stillness of the night, Job found peace, an enduring peace woven from the threads of acceptance, love, and hope.